Hello and welcome to Balatro Mythbusters. We are your hosts, Zaino, and Bear is with me. Today we are going to be testing a bunch of different myths in Balatro, different mechanics in this game. A lot of things make sense, and then a lot of things just don't make sense. Each of us are going to be going over a few myths in our own video. First, we're going to intro the myth, and then we're going to test, and then we're going to come back together, see if our prediction was right, talk it over, and maybe even argue whether the game mechanics should be changed in the future or not. The first myth I'll be testing has to do with Blackboard, and I want to know three things about Blackboard. One, does it trigger with debuff cards in your hand, whether those are spades and clubs, or if you have hearts and diamonds debuffed in your hand? Does it trigger with a stone card in your hand? And then lastly, does it trigger with no cards held in hand? I mean, Blackboard does say it needs all clubs and spades in hand to work. So Bear, what are your predictions on this?
Well, this is, I think, one of the most confusingly written cards in the game. So these are all very valid questions. I think I know some of these because I tested a ton of debuff mechanics in a video recently. But it does seem kind of random. Like, I don't know if there's a consistent logic to this.
I have my prediction, although I think I only know one of these for sure. And for the audience, I'm not going to tell you which one of those is. And the other two, I have an idea because I think I know the way that Balatro logic works, and it actually works with, like, it's one of those things that's kind of tricky. And it's like, it shouldn't make sense, but it does. But generally speaking, my guesses are going to be, does it trigger with debuffed cards in hand? I actually think it's going to, the answer is no, because if it's a debuffed card, it is not a spade or a club. And for that reason, I'm also saying no for stone cards. But for no cards in hand, depending on what logic you use, I know that sounds weird that there could be multiple different types of logic, but if no cards are in hand, then simultaneously all cards are clubs and spades. I think that's the way Balatro looks at it because it's nil. So I think weirdly it does work when there's no cards in hand, but I may have had that happen to me once early on, but I haven't had it in a long time and I do not remember.
Okay. So for me, I'm pretty sure I know the debuff one because I tested these out. And I think it doesn't care the card's debuffed.
Oh,
it
okay.
Still looks at the suit underneath.
So it's yes, no.
So it will trigger with debuffed cards if they're the right suit.
Okay. So not like the interaction with Ride the Bus, where if you play debuffed face cards that are scoring, it doesn't crash the bus. But if you have like a diamond or heart debuffed in your hand, it will not trigger. It'll look at the base suit.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
All right. What about with stone cards?
So I think if you followed the debuff logic, it would look under the stone card for this suit.
Oh, all right. Your answers are complicated. Look under stone card. I'm going to have to test that.
See, I don't think it works that way, but like, we should test it.
We should test it.
It's
I mean,
so
yeah,
inconsistent.
And then lastly, does it trigger with no cards left in your hand?
I'm going to say yes. But
Yes.
this is like a riddle trying to solve this question. If
No.
you have no cards, are all your cards spades and clubs?
Exactly. I'm really trying to I took several logic classes during my philosophy degree at Berkeley. I'm trying to rack my brain because it sounds like one of those things that like is a got you, and it like the answer is yes, it should work, but it seems so unintuitive. Like if I have no cards, then all the cards left in my hand aren't spades and clubs because there are no cards. But I guess the answer is just yes. All right. Well, now, next thing you're going to see is I'm going to go test this, and then Bear and I are going to come back, and we're going to go over the results. So jumping into this test, the first test that I did was checking if my heart and diamond cards were debuffed with Blackboard trigger, and it did not. I'm not completely surprised by this, so then I tried it with club cards debuffed, and it does trigger. So Bear was right. It will simply look under the debuffed card to see if it will trigger or not. And I guess this makes sense a little bit since debuffed cards are meant to not score, but I guess technically they're still a card. So now we're going to try the tower, and we're first going to try towering a bunch of heart and diamond cards to see, you know, if you only allow stones left in your hand, and underneath them are heart and diamonds, will it trigger? And the answer is no. So then moving on to kind of the second part of the test, what if all the stone cards were actually clubs and spades? And if Bear's theory is correct, it would look under the stone cards here as well, would see that they're spades and clubs, and Blackboard will trigger. However, as you're going to see, it does not. So a stone card does not count for any suit, so technically it counts as not a diamond or not a club or spade, so Blackboard does not trigger. However, if you have no cards in your hand, it will. All right, Bear. So the test is complete, and I think you almost sweeped, except for the stone card portion. But let's go through it one by one. So Blackboard, trigger with debuff in hand. You were correct. It does if the debuff card is the right suit. Which at first I was kind of confused about, but then I just reread what debuff actually means, and it just means it can't be scored. So I guess in that sense it makes sense. But you were right about that one.
Okay, I was pretty sure that one because I did do a lot of research on the debuff stuff, but I stand by my statement that Blackboard is just confusing, and every interaction could go either way.
It's like I think there is a set of logic that makes sense for how it works currently. However, because Balatro is that of not very hand-holdy, there's not a lot of instruction. I do think Blackboard becomes one of the toughest jokers for new players. It's like if you really think about it and you have like a philosophical conversation, or if you look at the logic, maybe you come to some conclusion, but most people playing Balatro are not going to do that. So when they get Blackboard, you see a debuffed card, and like that debuff, let's say you had a shoot the moon, right? And a queen was debuffed. Well, that queen won't hit the plus 13 molt, but that is technically because even though that card is in hand, it is scored, and Blackboard's not asking anything of those cards just for them to be a certain thing. But I stand by what you said. It's very confusing. I don't know. Do you have any ideas on how to clean it up, like make it less confusing? I think it's probably just going to stay that way in the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe it'd be I don't know. Does it make more sense if instead of saying your whole hand has to be spades or clubs, it says nothing in your hand can't be anything else?
You almost like you cannot have anything but spades or clubs in your hand. I think that would actually clear some stuff up, because as we go to number 2, stone cards, no matter what, will cause Blackboard not to trigger. And again, here I think the logic behind it is technically a stone card doesn't have any suit, and Blackboard is asking that everything be spade or clubs, and it doesn't look under the stone card. It doesn't do anything. It just will not work. And I think that becomes a lot more clear for that in the debuff portion if we word it the way you just described it.
Yeah, I think so. But it makes sense now. Once you know everything else works, it does all sort of come together.
Yeah, and then finally, does Blackboard trigger when you have no cards in hand? And once again, this is what I think to most new users, your wording maybe make more sense, even though it's a little bit more convoluted. It's longer to write out on the card. That it does trigger when you don't have any cards. Because if you don't have any cards, then technically, I wish I knew how to phrase this properly. but I believe in certain sects of logic, if there is nothing and you're asking that everything be a certain way, then technically that's true if there is nothing. I guess that's what's happening with Blackboard here, but I always find this very funny. And I do think this matters. It's hopefully people watching this video now know, because there's plenty of situations where you may end up with no cards in hand with Blackboard and you would think it wouldn't trigger.
Definitely. It would help to know all those going into it so you don't make a mistake.
They could have a tutorial seed just for Blackboard.
Yes, and Matador, please, too.
Matador, I mean, Local Thunk already said in the Bloomberg interview that thing's getting a rework, and thank gosh, because talk about making no sense. That could be a special episode of Mythbusters of 15 hours of trying to make Matador work properly.
Yeah, for real. I mean, that's another one where, like, it does make sense once you know the logic, but it's unclear. You could easily assume wrong.
I think this is a really good segue into our next set of tests, which are going to have to do with Chicot and Luchador, because the logic there is... I thought I understood how the multiple Chicot worked, and then I went into this test, and I was pleasantly surprised. So let's jump into that. Our next myth has to do with the legendary Chicots Joker. Balatro University taught us that Chicot works in very mysterious ways where it doesn't just debuff a boss. It actually applies the opposite of what that boss is doing as a debuff mechanic. And the thing I want to test now is getting two Chicots, two Chicots, if you will, and seeing what happens when you play certain boss blinds. Will two Chicots give you plus $1? Will two Chicots give you, or on the tooth, will Chicot give you plus 1 hand size on the manacle? And then if you play the wall, does it give you an extra small blind to go against? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Bear.
I have no clue about this one. I've heard of this bug, but I don't know if I've ever had two Chicots. I'm usually disappointed if I have one Chicot.
That's the same way. That's why I'm very excited to test it. It could change how people approach this. Along those lines, I am, during the testing phase, going to also try two Luchadors. Selling two Luchadors and seeing if it does anything.
Oh, the tag team match.
The tag team match, exactly. We'll try it first with two Chicots and then with two Luchadors. But I have a feeling that maybe two Luchadors don't even do anything. So that's why I'm centering the myth around Chicot. My predictions are that it will give you $1, that it will give you the plus hand size, but it won't change the scoring requirement to be smaller. Again, I don't know much about this, so these are all wild guesses. But if the myth, the rumor is true that it just reverses the boss, I feel like that's how it's going to work. And then I feel like maybe in the coding of the game, the way the blinds work with the wall is just different, where the reversible doesn't go under a certain requirement. But who knows? What are your guesses?
Boy, I really don't know. The tooth giving you money doesn't sound like something that could happen. I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
The hand size, I think, is yes. I think I've heard that referenced as like the main bug about it.
Correct. Yeah. That's the main myth.
The wall, sure, that probably works.
Okay. We got some disagreements in here, so I'm going to go test. I'm also going to go see if Luchador does the same thing as Chicot. So I'll go through each one and we'll come back and report our findings and discuss what the heck is wrong with the coding on this legendary Joker. So here we are with 4 Chicots on the manacle. And this is the main myth. This is the myth that I think really got started in Dr. Specter's chat, that Chicot can give you extra hand size on the manacle, and it does. It gives you up to 11 hand size if you have 4, right? So for each Chico, after the initial one that's giving you the plus hand size to reverse the manacle, it's giving you an extra one. And fun fact, that buff is permanent for the rest of the game. Now on the tooth, unfortunately, multiple Chicos does not mean plus money. However, this is where I was wrong and Bear was absolutely right. The wall does go down. And if you have enough Chicos, you can get the blind to be basically extra small. We move on now to our test with Luchador, and unfortunately, Luchador doesn't seem to work besides doing the initial boss blind change, basically removing it. I'll get into my thoughts on why I think this works the way when I discuss after the test with Bear, but unfortunately, Luchador did not work with any of these tests, but now we know. That's why we test. So Chico does have these glitches, Luchador does not. So I'm back from my exploration with Chico and Luchador. And I think the first thing to go over is Luchador does not work the same way as the Chico. And I think what's happening here is the reason Chico has the bug is because all the disabling of the boss blinds happens simultaneously with Chico versus Luchador. Once you sell one, it's achieved disabling it. The game can check that it's already been disabled, so selling a further one just will not do anything. Versus, for some reason, when it moves over to the second Chico, the game isn't checking if there already was a first Chico to disable the boss blind. So, heads up, you can't do the glitch with Luchador.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And it also makes sense that the legendary would be more powerful than just a Luchador.
That's true. That's true. So let's jump into it. The first one, I was hoping so badly that if you had multiple Chicos and you played the tooth, you'd get $1 per played. But I tried it with 5 Chicos. Nothing happens. It just disables the effect. So you were correct about that, but I'm sad about it. I think if Chico is going to work this way and it's not a complete glitch that Thunk's changing, give me the money for having 3 Chicos.
I agree. If you click a soul and you get Chico, you should be financially compensated.
It's a great way to put it. I think Doctor has put it best that Chico's not a bad legendary, it's a boring legendary.
Yes.
So
that's bang on.
What made this a myth in the first place, and if you have not watched it, Doctor's done a video about it, but multiple Chicos giving you plus hand size on the manacle. This does work. So if you have multiple Chicos, after the first one disables it, the other ones are giving you plus hand size. And this becomes permanent for the rest of your run. Because of the permanence of it all, I do believe this is a glitch that will be removed. Or maybe not. Like you said, I think it makes Chico a little bit more interesting. Would you, like truly from a game perspective, do you think that should be removed? Or do you think it's a fun thing that you should get with Chico?
I don't know. It's pretty fun, and it's like so niche that I don't think it would ever happen to you by accident. It's only there if you're like trying to exploit it.
That's true.
Which I think just makes it fun.
Yeah, it's definitely not game breaking, right? There's a lot of other things that are very powerful in this game that are a lot easier than getting 2 Chicos.
Yeah, for sure.
And then lastly, the wall. Will multiple Chicos actually make the boss requirement extra small? It does. I was really surprised by this. I think the way I thought the $1 and the wall would work are kind of reversed in the way that whatever way Thunk coded it, the $1 for the tooth is very hard coded, and once that's debuffed, there's nothing going on there. It's not counteracting a negative $1 with a positive $1. But the wall, it just every Chico was reducing the percentage by 40%. If you watch the video, because I had 4 Chicos, the requirement ended up being like 400 points instead of 5,000. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I'm still surprised that one works. It is weird. Some of them work and some of them don't, because it's like you could kind of conceive of a reverse for a lot of them. But I guess it does come down to how things are coded.
Yeah. Well, now I want to see when my hearts are debuffed, the hearts become super buffed. They count They score twice or something. Give me extra power with multiple Chicos.
Yes, do it, please.
All right. Now on to the final myth for my portion of the episode. Of course, you can watch the other part of this Mythbusters episode on Bear's channel. We're gonna dive into the pillar boss and see how we can un-debuff the cards. So my last myth to crush, to bust, if you will, revolves around the pillar. I've been told in my chat several times that adding an enhancement to a card that was already played that round un-debuffs it. So if you don't know, the pillar debuffs the cards that you have previously played in that ante. I believe I've tested that and that does work. But what I want to also know is, does adding an addition do the same thing? How about adding a seal to a card? Will that un-debuff it? And maybe when I'm testing, try some other things revolving around death or DNA, even though I have a good idea of how that works. But I'm curious, Bear, your experiences with the pillar, and have you been told this by your chat as well?
I've heard this. I've also, I think I might have tested all of these before. Again, when I did the debuff mechanic video. But I'm not sure I remember. The only one I remember, I'm pretty sure the enhancing works. It undebuffs it.
I think we can say, even though this is the we'll test it. We'll test it and you'll see shortly if it does work. But I think we're both pretty certain on that. I think the addition and the seal one are where things get fuzzy. I'm actually going to go that it will work when you addition the card, that does change it, but just adding a seal for whatever reason doesn't change the debuff mechanic of the card.
It's it seems inconsistent if like some of these work and don't. So I almost want to say yes to all of them.
All right, so Bear's gonna go with yes all three. Yeah, I don't know what else to say except the animation of when you addition or enhance a card, it kind of like flips it, right? Like it literally is turning it into a new card. Versus when you add a seal, unless I'm misremembering, I feel like it just sticks the seal on top of it. Like it didn't change the card. That is the worst logic of all time. But that's why we're testing things.
I don't know. It makes as much sense as anything else.
There you go. I mean, that's Balatro.
I will say, like, enhancements, you can overwrite one enhancement with another, and you can do that with seals too.
But you can't with additions.
You can't do it with additions.
So maybe so that may be a reason to go with no for additions, but yes with seals. Well, we're gonna have to test that out. All right. Well, I'm gonna jump in, go into Balatro debugged. We're gonna find out exactly how to work with the pillar. Here we are on the pillar boss blind, and all these tests I think are gonna be pretty straightforward. So adding an enhancement like making a card gold will un-debuff the card. However, as you see here, adding the addition did nothing, and adding a seal did nothing. So it is only when you enhance a card will it un-debuff on the pillar. Also, a quick note, if you death a debuff card, both cards will become debuffed. So I'm back from the lab. Thank you, debug mod. I will link to the debug mod that we use to kind of record these videos in the description. It's very fun, and you can learn a lot about the game by trying to kind of just mess with it, spawn stuff, kind of break the game and see what happens. But this one, we both knew that adding an enhancement un-debuffs a debuffed card from the pillar boss, and that held true. I tested it in the video with gold, but I went through and tested it with every enhancement, and they all work. But this is where we both thought it would work and it didn't, was an addition. And I did notice something here, Bear. When you change the addition using an aura, it doesn't flip the card. So when you add an enhancement, it flips the card and then it turns back around. It didn't do that with an addition, and I wonder if that's kind of a signal of something happening with the game.
Oh, interesting. I never would have thought about it that way, but maybe.
Because seals, also, the other part of this test, do not un-debuff the card. And in both instances, if you use an aura or you add a seal using the spectral cards, the card will just stay on your screen, and it'll just turn something. It'll add the seal, or it'll just turn shiny, turn foil, what have you. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that's intentional. I think something, the way just maybe enhancements or additions or seals work, or the way Thunk had to maybe put things in a library caused it to be this way. But I feel like it's unintentional, and I feel like if enhancements work, additions should for sure work. I can go either way on seals, on debuffing stuff for the pillar. How about you?
It does just seem kind of crazy that one of these would work and the others wouldn't. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's crazy that the enhancing thing works in the first place because it really is the same card.
Yeah, you're
But
adding something to that card.
yeah, I can't even wrap my head around this one. This is just like a fluke of the code, I guess.
Yeah, I really think it comes down to that. And it's interesting because I added on one little extra part in the video of using the death to just explain that if you use a death on an un-debuff or on a debuffed card, that card will also be debuffed because it truly turned into an exact copy. The same thing will happen, I believe, with DNA. But yeah, there's just something in the code about enhancements that for whatever reason kind of reset that card. But what I will say is I don't believe it resets it in the way of maybe like a hiker. Like it will continue to keep having those bonus chips. I mean, maybe that's a test for a future date. I would be shocked if it broke the card. I'm almost certain it doesn't. But if hiker works on all these, I know this is a really weird way of thinking about it, but I feel like it should have the same set of rules then for the pillar boss. I have no idea why that is.
Yeah, I don't know the implications of this. This could apply to other stuff. I don't even know.
No, I'm definitely, after doing this test, I'm gonna start paying attention to when cards flip and then when things just happen to a card, and maybe devise some future Mythbuster episodes or tests around that to see if we can find some string of logic here. But this was fun. And again, we did this kind of in 2 parts. There's another 3 that we are testing on Bear's channel. So if you enjoyed this, go right now. The link's in the description. Go enjoy more Mythbusters with Bear and I. We go over Vampire, Riffraff, and Obelisk with some really interesting tests. And, I'll see you over there. So thank you for watching. And if you're enjoying this series, let us know down below and we'll make more episodes because I'm having fun.
We got a lot of more myths we can test too.
A lot. All right. Thank you guys. See you.